3 weeks ago, Alison, Olivia and I moved from Newport News to Yorktown. It's a move we'd wanted to make for some time. Those of you who are friends with Alison on Facebook may have noticed the number of times our for sale listing was posted over the last year. And when everything finally started to come together, it all happened very quickly. When the offer came in on our old house, the buyers wanted to close within a month, which meant we had to scramble to find a new house. A couple of places we really liked went off the market before we could act. But then we found the perfect house and made an offer the same day that it went on the market. And after a nail-biting weekend, our offer was accepted without change. So at the end of May, we moved out of the old house, closed on the sale, and moved to Yorktown into the new house. Now, full disclosure, the closing on our purchase has been delayed, thanks to some very technical issues on the seller's side, but our fabulous realtor is working hard to get it figured out. We will buy this house. And to be frank, buying it will strain our finances more than they already are. But we're doing it, of course, for our daughter. We believe in public schools, and we're zoned for Yorktown Elementary, which will get her off to a great start. What's more, our new neighborhood is much more diverse than where we lived before, both racially and in terms of there being other children, including many around Olivia's age. Of course, moving got me thinking of what brought us to Virginia, coming here from Colorado a little over 5 years ago. And that was because only a month before, we had enjoyed a very busy week of candidating here at the fellowship. For those of you who weren't here at the time, or if you haven't been part of the search for a minister in any other congregation, that's the 8 or 9 days when a congregation gets to know its potential minister and vice versa. A couple of things I remember from that week have been on my mind lately. First, I remember being told by former ministers and other religious professionals outside the congregation that Unitarian Universalism has great potential in Hampton Roads, but that our congregations in Newport News, Williamsburg, and Norfolk need to be stable and healthy for that potential to be realized. Second, I remember speaking about my desire to grow as a minister in partnership with a congregation that is also growing, not only as measured by the number of members, but also in terms of program breadth, spiritual depth, and community warmth. On the second Sunday of candidating, in fact, I shared these words. Beginning my side of the search process, I knew I was seeking a congregation that expresses an earnest intention to grow the beloved community to which our Unitarian Universalist faith calls us. My call is to serve a congregation that shares my vision of Unitarian Universalism, also sharing with it a commitment to the long-haul process of stretching its ministry and growing its membership. The essential components of this would include providing meaningful worship that inspires and uplifts, encouraging spiritual growth that stretches and empowers, developing a caring community that supports and comforts, and fomenting prophetic action that widens the circle of compassion and justice. I am committed to the Unitarian Universalist ministry, I continued, by seeking excellence in all these areas and by encouraging excellence through shared ministry. While numerical growth and increased multiculturalism are not ultimate goals as such, they are consequences of such excellence, signs that we are faithfully responding to the call of beloved community. At the close of this candidating week I concluded 5 years ago, I have no doubt that the fellowship is that congregation. Now, we have made great strides in following through on this vision during the last 5 years. And in buying our new house, of course, Alison and I are renewing our commitment to be here so that you all and I can continue our work together. But since we are at this 5-year mark, the time has come, my friends, for us to talk about some things. First, I want to acknowledge the incredible work that a number of people do here to help make this a fabulous congregation. Last Sunday, for instance, we recognized our religious educators and thanked them for all that they do to make our RE program not only possible, but also great. And today we recognized our singers and musicians and thanked them for the beauty and the joy that they bring to our Sunday services. What's more, outside of those two sizable groups of volunteers, there are our hospitality teams and plenty of others who help in ways large and small, and often in quiet ways behind the scenes. So I also want to mention our fellowship administrator, Mary Elizabeth Cotton, who has been asked by the board to take on so much additional work this year, and yet most of that work is invisible except to a handful of people in leadership. But it is no exaggeration to say that Mary Elizabeth has literally kept this congregation running these last 6 months. So it may seem like a cliche, and most of us may not actually listen to the words because we've heard them so many times. But it really is true that as each Sunday's lay leader reminds us when it's time to collect the offering, all that this fellowship is and all that this congregation has are what we bring to it. Literally everything is here because we have brought it here. Our time and our money and our effort, of course, but also our hopes and our fears, our happiness and our sadness. And as my colleague Angela Herrera says, in the words with which we began our service, we do want people to bring their brokenness and their anger and their joy and their passion into this place. Bring your loving and your courage and your conviction, she writes. Bring your need for healing and your powers to heal, for there is work to do. But there are other things that we sometimes bring too. Anxiety, distrust, a focus on scarcity, that there isn't enough. A healthy community can handle these and help heal them. But if they're not healed, they're contagious and can become part of the fabric. Every spring, for instance, I become aware of anxiety that I might leave. It's not triggered by anything that I can tell other than the season. Though this year, having our house on the market, even being 100% clear that we were moving locally, probably didn't help. The fact is that this congregation has been well trained in the art of being left by ministers. With such a long list of people who've served this congregation both part-time and then full-time over the years, that Joanne was able to take all those names and create a number of verses set to the tune of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, as a song that the children sang to me during candidating week. Andrew, with your brain so bright, they sang, won't you lead us with insight? And then there's scarcity. This isn't about whether or not there is enough money or time or volunteers to do what we need to do, but about whether there will be enough of them. And the fact is that if you think and act like there won't be enough of whatever you need, chances are there won't be. There's nothing magical about this. After all, focusing on what can't be done, only ever emphasizing whatever's wrong, treating generosity as a matter of guilt and shame, well, those are going to turn off a lot of people. On the other hand, focusing on what can be done, taking every opportunity to emphasize whatever's right, and celebrating generosity with joy and gratitude, those are part of approaching the world with a spirit of abundance. And that is just as much a self-fulfilling prophecy as is a spirit of scarcity. And don't let anyone ever try to fool you into thinking that scarcity is hard-nosed realism while abundance is mere wishful thinking. As I said, neither of them are about whether there is or is not enough, but whether there will be enough in the future. To put it another way, they are not so much reflective of the availability of needed resources as they are predictive of them. The fact is, of course, that any organization that is entirely dependent on volunteer support will tend to behave out of a spirit of scarcity. And churches in particular seem to behave this way, constantly bemoaning what they lack, perhaps out of the belief that it will guilt their members into giving more. So it's not surprising to find that non-profit consultants criticize churches generally, not only for acting out of a spirit of scarcity, but also for casting themselves as sinking ships. And why would anybody ever want to get on board a sinking ship? So the board and the staff and I were talking about this summer before last at the board's start of the church year retreat to do some bigger picture thinking than is possible in their average agenda-driven meeting. We recognize that it's easy to fall prey to a spirit of scarcity, while it takes intention and effort to embrace a spirit of abundance. And as congregations go, we actually do pretty well in celebrating abundance, though there is a persistent strain of scarcity that probably has more to do with our history as a lay-led congregation for the first 40 years than anything that's actually going on in the present. Still, we can always do better. Scarcity and abundance are both self-fulfilling prophecies, remember, and we need to be abundant. And in talking about this, the board and the staff and I, we realize that what we need is a story, a good story, no, a great story, an inspiring story, a story that celebrates the amazing things this congregation has done and inspires us to be bold in our vision for the future. And it was board member at large Connie Keller who came up with the perfect name for that story, The Little Church That Did. Of course, it didn't take the other board members long to add to that, making it the little church that did and can and should and will. And at that retreat, the board agreed to set itself the goal of taking the stories we already tell about ourselves and bringing them together in celebration of the sort of abundant congregation that we aspire to be. One such story tells how this congregation was founded in the late 1950s by a handful of local residents who sought, in their words, to foster liberal religious attitudes and living through group study, worship, service, work, and recreation. It was chartered as a lay-led church at the height of the 20-year program that founded hundreds of new congregations around the country, many of which no longer exist. And within a year, not only did the fellowship have its own building, but it hosted a conference for all of the Unitarian churches in Virginia. From the start, and in defiance of prevailing social attitudes, the membership was racially integrated, thanks to a close association with Hampton University. Then, and in the decades since, members of the fellowship have demonstrated for civil rights, for women's rights, for LGBT rights, and the congregation is home to the oldest pagan group in Virginia. This is the little church that did. Another story, another chapter of our story, tells us how the fellowship's building burnt down in 1979, but 3 items survived the fire. The original membership book, which includes the names and signatures of the charter members on its first page, the charter itself issued to the congregation when it was founded, and the chalice, which was given by former youth Keith Dixon, and which we continue to light today at the start of every Sunday service. Then, 15 years ago, the fellowship took the plunge and called its first full-time settled minister. Unfortunately, that didn't go well. But rather than give up on professional ministry, the congregation made a commitment to try again. And 5 years ago, just before I got here, you decided to buy additional property, the office building out on the corner, a decision made at the worst time in the Great Recession, when banks were imploding and realtors were finding other jobs. My colleague Jean Pupke, minister in Richmond, says that buying our office building was something that we had no right to do, but we did it anyway. What's more, a couple of years ago we raised the funds to finance the mortgage ourselves, rather than continuing to pay just interest to a private lender. And now we have a new chapter of the great flood of 2015, of how a full third of the congregation showed up to work on the remediation, reconstruction and reassembly of this building, of our 2-month sojourn at Sandy Bottom and all the people who made that possible, and of our joyful return to a renovated sanctuary building. Put it all together, and this congregation really does have an amazing story. This is the little church that can. So here's one reason why we need to keep telling ourselves that story. And it's a reason that really needs us to avoid the guilt and the shame of scarcity. Last month at the annual meeting, Finance Committee Chair Dan Moore presented for congregational vote a budget for the church year that starts next month. It's a budget that lets us do a lot of great things, and it is a balanced budget. But it is still, as Dan explained, a budget that falls short of what we need it to be. The Sunday Services Committee and the Religious Education Committee both had their budgets cut, and those committees are responsible for almost everything we do on a Sunday morning, which for most people is the reason why we even exist as a congregation. And the Music Committee, which provides us with so much joy and beauty on a Sunday morning, they didn't get any more money to do that either. The Social Justice Committee didn't get the money it needs to fund what we do. Our administrator didn't get the hours she needs to do the work we require her to do, though we still pay her for the hours she does work because not to do so is illegal. And according to UUA guidelines, Mary Elizabeth's rate of pay continues to fall short of fair compensation. And there are other necessary expenditures as well, besides these that would take about $10,000 to fix. There's paying our fair share membership obligation to the UUA. There's building our savings to a prudent level. And there's setting money aside for the sabbatical that is part of my contract here, but which has never been funded. Now this is hardly good news, but this is the reality of certain things that at this moment we're not able to do as a congregation. And not only do you have a right to know these things, but we ought to be talking about them more than just what we did at the annual meeting. What's more, I also want us to be able to face these challenges in a spirit of abundance rather than of scarcity, because that's the only way we are going to be able to do what it is that we need to do. So take another look at everything we have going for us right now. We're back in our own fabulously renovated sanctuary building, which is the next best thing to actually having a new building. Even before that, we were in about the best worship space we could want, with our hospitality teams and others going above and beyond to create a great Sunday morning experience. And we came out of it with high morale in spite of our dislocation. And even more remarkably, with all of that going on, we had our most successful canvass ever. We are not a sinking ship. So I firmly believe that we can talk as a congregation about what we need to be as a congregation, that we can be realistic without being pessimistic, and that we will do so with the understanding and the love that we bring to so much that we do together. Because this is the little church that did and can. And in fact, that's happening already. People are stepping up with creative plans to boost our budget with non-pledge income, which is to say ways to bring in outside money rather than continually going back to our own members to ask for more. And as Dan explained at the annual meeting, much more important than ideas are people willing to make them happen. In other words, we don't need you to say, how about if someone did this? Rather, we need you to say, I will do this. This congregation's members already provide the bulk of the budget, which allows us to do so many wonderful things through your generous pledges. But the flip side of that coin is that members also make it possible to run fundraisers like the yard sale earlier this month that was so successful on 2 counts. Not only did it raise nearly $1,200, but thanks to the items that our members donated, thanks to our members getting the word out on social media, Thanks to Brandy and our other members' hard work in running the yard sale, that's over $1,000 of outside money. So here's the thing. This congregation doesn't exist for itself. And I'm not here to serve the congregation for its own sake. This congregation exists to make a difference not only in the lives of the people who come here, but to make a difference in the world. And I'm here to help you all make that possible. This is the little church that should. And if you ever doubted that our values and our good news and our faith are needed in the world, just think about what happened on Wednesday night when 9 beautiful people were killed in a heinous act of terrorism. Think about how, over the last year, we have seen white privilege demonstrated again and again, telling African Americans to be afraid on the street, in the supermarket, in the playground, at the swimming pool, in church. We have work to do. And don't forget that we don't get to call ourselves allies. That is a title that may only be bestowed on us by the people who see us show up and show up again, and keep showing up until eventually we have proved that they can count on us to stand with them each and every time. We have work to do. We have more than good ideas. We have high hopes. And this is a congregation that has proved time and again that it can solve its problems and come out of those problems even better. We have work to do. And we need to do it not by crying doom and gloom, but by celebrating everything that we have to celebrate. Unitarian Universalism continues to have great potential in Hampton Roads. The fellowship will keep on doing amazing things that transform lives both within and beyond our walls. And my desire is to realize that great potential by doing those amazing things in partnership with you. This is the little church that will. And may the congregation say amen, because that is the truth. Amen.